So let us get started. So welcome back to the security stream. I feel I'm going to be sounding like a stuck record after today, but my name's Jamie Pease. I'm the chair of the security working group here for the GSE UK region. And I will introduce our presenter in a moment, Tim Redding. So this is session 7G. Just a quick reminder, don't forget to give feedback if you've attended previous sessions this morning. Please do complete that. It's really important for the presenter and GSE and also for yourselves if you want those CPE points. But up now, we have Tim Redding from Luminix. I hope I pronounced your company name correctly, Tim. Good. And so yesterday, if you remember, in the security stream, we had a ransomware session. So the theme continues today around ransomware protection, something I think keeps some of us awake at night, personally and professionally. So Tim, without further ado, over to you. Welcome to the security stream.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you about this. Hello, everyone. I can tell by the size of the audience that yes, as we all know, this is a troubling moment. So we all know why this is so important these days, sadly. It does feel like you're under siege sometimes, spammers, phishing attacks, etc. And it is important to have a set of tools to address this requirement, not just the one. It's good to have a toolbox that you can rummage around in. So to that end, it would be great to introduce the opportunity, take the opportunity to introduce you to an additional option for extending data protection for your mainframe virtual tape environment. So that's the area that I wanted to talk to today. The how you can introduce it for your mainframe virtual tape environment and how it interacts with things like your potential disk services. So if I open with the ZOS disk service, if you're looking at Ransom Protect for your disk environment, whether it be through the Hitachi Data Fortress, whether it be from the IBM CyberVault type architectures, you're looking at generating snapshots of your ZOS environment. So you're looking at taking snapshot images of your disk service as it's running, whether it be hourly, 4 times a day, daily, and keeping those for a period that represents your data protection period. So week, month, 3 months, etc. And it was expressed rather nicely in the session in November. These disk environments, you can recover to them, but if you are looking to recover a ZOS environment from these environments, that ZOS environment looks like it's had a crash stop. It's basically as if you've walked up to the wall, hit the switch, and down goes your power. And the first thing you do to recover from these sorts of environments is you need to bring all your transactional database services, your batch services, you need to bring them back to consistency points. And that's where the tape service comes in. You can't do it purely off the disk environment. You need a tape service off that. So can you extend ransom protection for virtual tape? Now, I've drawn this in as noddy diagrams because I tried to make this as generic as possible. You're going to be looking at a mainframe tape service. So you're going to have virtual tape components, a virtualization layer, some kind of storage capability. And that can be, I've drawn it in a single site. It can be dual site, multi-site, various replication types, synchronous, asynchronous, etc., etc. And then you're going to be looking to generate a version of your virtual tape environment in your Fortress or CyberVault, plus the capability of being able to roll that back to match previous versions of your potential snapshot ZOS environments. Now, there are two primary ways of doing that. You can take snapshots. So you can replicate what you do for your ZOS disks, and you can snapshot your virtual tape environment. Now, this brings in, I think it's fairly infrastructure heavy to look at this process. We do have architectures that support this ourselves. relies on the storage capability. It brings in quite a lot of infrastructure. And it's not just the infrastructure to achieve the snapshot, it's the infrastructure to roll back to a previous copy. Do you roll back with the virtualization capacity in the cyber vault? Do you roll it back and present that file system to the virtualization capability in your production environment? How do you achieve all of this? So I think this is quite a heavy option, but it definitely works. You know, we have services around this. So that's the snapshot service. The other alternative is actually quite simple. The virtualization product, I mean, I know ours does, I know IBM TS7700 does. You have a grace period on expiry. So you can exploit the grace period within your tape catalog, so that if you scratch a volume, the actual virtualization environment does not hand it out for rewrite until the grace period has expired. So it's very simple, but it brings in, you have to maintain that extra copy at all points of the source systems. So this starts to ramp up your storage requirements at all points of your source systems, including the cyber vault. And there are some considerations for how you actually use those versions if you roll back your ZOS environment sort of protection. Nothing major, it's all good practice. But there could be another option, and this is really what I wanted to talk to you about today. Whether we can add another tool to the kit bag for you to pull out as necessary. So what if we could introduce the capability to create and maintain air-gapped copies of a virtual tape environment with multi-version support, but also including the capability to recover to any point in time within a given date range. So the ability to recover to those multi-versions to any point in time within that given date range. And that's the subject for the next 30, 40 minutes. Now, to introduce this idea to you, I need to do a little bit of review. So I need to review the cloud tape services, the enhancements that we've added to it for ransom protection, and then a brief discussion on implementation, integration, and using it. And then I did have best practice in there, but then I thought, no, actually, good practice. It's too new a service. I think practice is being built as we go. We do have a document on good practice, a white paper. It's fairly generic and it applies to both grace period protection, snapshot protection, and this. So it's, if you want to read, I can quite happily send you a copy, but I'll just go through some of the notes today. So if I go back to a mainframe tape service, and I've drawn it in as fairly noddy, it's a single set of CGX. This could be, as I said, dual site, multi-site, etc. You will have a set of device ranges, and as an SMS environment, typically a set of device ranges associated with an MTL, and a set of virtual tape ranges, and you'll have several sets of these. They will be supporting either multiple tapeplex, multiple workloads within a tapeplex, etc. So fairly straightforward as a basic tape service. Now, Cloud Tape introduced the capability to replicate some or all of the valses in your primary mainframe tape services to buckets on an S3 repository. And that actually buckets on a number of S3 repositories or multiple buckets on an S3 repository, but we'll stick to just a bucket on an S3 repository. It includes additional options to release data space from the source environment. So the capability to retain the metadata for the tape in the primary storage environment, but release the data space. So effectively acting like an archive for tape, ML2 for tape, if you like. And of course, if we're going to do that, then we need automatic recovery on mount, transparent tiering, issue a mount, the tape is recovered from the cloud environment, and Bob's your uncle, you're back in business. So that is the basic Luminex Cloud Tape service.
Tim, I don't know if it's worth just briefly explaining for some people on the call what S3 repository is.
I do apologize. S3 is the, and it started off as the Amazon Web Services standard for talking to cloud. So there's Swift, there's S3. S3 has become a good standard and is widely supported across multiple storage vendors. It's available for you as either a subscription model from a public cloud type service, so Google Cloud Services, Amazon Web Services, Hitachi Content Platform, or as an on-premise service built on top of relevant storage, so NetApp, again, Hitachi Cloud's platform, and that's both classic and cloud scale, etc. And it's got a standard structure for talking to the S3 repository. So that's S3. Effectively, it gives you an air-gapped copy. You connect to the immutable object store for our replication. You have the capability to be flexible about what you protect, so either key data backups or protect everything. By default, it's everything. And for us, it's got a transparent data movement between the CGX and the S3 repository. And it's moved around like a standard tape. So if you write it compressed, it's transferred compressed. If it has encryption on write, then it is replicated encrypted to the S3 repository. And that's your virtual air gap for the storage. Now that's the element that we've taken as the basis and added some enhancements for it. So if you take the basic service and then say, well, actually, we don't want to replace a Vulsa. If we replicate a Vulsa into the cloud and there's already a previous version, we actually want to keep that previous version for a period. So multi-version Vulsa report support, plus management. And then add to that the capability to recover those specific versions of tapes. So if you have previous versions, you can roll back to previous versions. And you can do that with create date and time. And then on top of that, there are additional recovery options. And by recovery options, I'm talking about recovery environments, recovery systems, recovery storage, recovery areas, if you like. And I'll talk about that when we get to that section. So those are the elements we've added. Basically, multi-version support. So if you have a Vulsa and it is rewritten, goes scratch, rewritten, or if it's modified, any change to that Vulsa, it is re-replicated to the S3 target. So this gives you multiple versions of the same Vulsa in the cloud, or the S3 repository rather, with a date timestamp. Now, for cloud services, using it just as a cloud storage repository, the default recovery, it's always to the latest version and to the source storage pool. So if you have a tape image that you've released the data space on in your primary storage pool, and you issue a tape mount, the cloud service that on our CGX will go to the S3 repository and recover the data portion for that tape. And it's always the latest version, and it's always to the source storage pool. However, a key element for Ransom Protect is that the recovery storage pool does not actually need tape metadata. So you can actually use a completely empty storage pool as a recovery area. And this introduces the capability to have isolated recovery areas and other services for various functions around Ransom Protect services. And then if you add the capability to specify user-defined recovery timestamps, this brings in the infinite snap recovery. So this means that you have, for a given date range, you have complete granularity over how you recover tapes from the repository. So for recovery of tape images indexed in a tape catalog, so let's assume you're taking ZOS disk snapshots, and you recover back to a ZOS disk snapshot, you can actually generate, you can recreate the tape catalog with that date timestamp relevant to the ZOS disk snapshot. all the tape recoveries performed from that point on will be the latest versions relative to that timestamp. Now, what this means is you've isolated the protection period from any need to synchronize a process to the ZOS snapshot timestamp. And it is continuous data protection from the production environments. And this brings in capabilities around forensic analysis, selective data recovery, surgical recovery, I believe IBM used the terms, etc. That's what we say when we say we introduce the capability to create and maintain immutable air-gapped copies of a virtual tape environment. And that's with the recovery of data at any selected point of time within a given date range. So that's the service that we're saying that we have now. It's the alternative to snapshot. It's the alternative to exploiting the grace period. And in terms of recovery and capacity, I've got those in the next couple of slides. So thanks, Damien. I'll throw those in now. If you're looking to set this up, for us, it's a very straightforward implementation. You would have one or more S3 targets, whether it be on-premise, off-premise, public, private, etc., etc. We would add the feature to a Luminex virtual tape service, define the source storage pools and targets, define the protected date range that you're looking to exploit. So if you're looking for 2 weeks worth of ZOS disk snapshots, you might want to say 21 days worth of tape within that data population. And then there is the time taken to actually populate the ransom protect repository. Now, the functionality of the service, it's extremely flexible when it comes to recovery. I think that's a good thing, but it means that we could spend a fair amount of time setting up recovery systems and recovery areas for you. So I saw that as a service engagement. I can't be specific at this point because the flexibility around the capability is extremely high. And you can actually integrate this into any Luminex virtual tape architecture. So if you're looking to just say you've got a 2-site model asynchronous replication, and all you're doing is looking to enhance your data protection for that service, you can add this capability at any point in time to that tape environment. Or you can take it all the way into your full Cyber Vault data fortress type architecture. There really isn't a limit on how you can do this. And any CGX in the configuration, any system can be used to populate the ransom protect repository. So that's basically the capability. You can introduce it into any Luminex virtual tape environment, simple to implement, simple to populate. When it comes down to using it as a service, then of course you're going to want to know about the data population points. So you need to talk about the size of the repository. We need to talk a little bit about disk mod processing, asynchronous replication, because it's an asynchronous service to populate the data repository. A little bit on data indexing, and definitely reference to encryption. And then we need to talk about data recovery, because it's no good putting your data in there if you can't get it out. So we need to talk about how you could use this for data recovery, whether it be for surgical recovery or catastrophic recovery. And within surgical recovery, that brings in the subset of looking at it for either data validation, for forensic analysis, or specific recovery to individual points in time. So if we look at the size of the repository, then it's fairly straightforward to calculate. If you plot your typical tape environment as an expiry curve, and this is a typical tape environment, this is actually quite a gentle curve. Environments that have got high DB2, IMS usage, there's huge transactional turnover. They tend to be a lot sharper at the front end in terms of growth. If all updates are to scratch tapes, and that's, I'll address this bit more in a second, then the repository is slightly larger than the rate of change covered by the protected period. So in this instance, I've pulled out 4 weeks. That is the addition that you'd make to your repository for 4 weeks worth of tape transactions. Slightly larger relates to tapes going scratch within that protected period and being rewritten several times. So there is a margin you'd put on top of it. So the repository size is the total compressed data, plus the changes for the protected period, plus the margin that you need to add for those tapes that go scratch within that protected period. And note, the repository is always right-sized for the environment. It contains the core data, plus all the changes for the protected period, exactly the same as a disk snapshot would. If we look at disk mod, we are replicating at Vulsa level into the ransom protect data repository. For synchronous replication, we replicate at block level. For cloud services, we replicate at Vulsa level. So for any change to a Vulsa, rewrite a disk mod, and the Vulsa is re-replicated. So this has the potential, disk mod has the potential to skew the repository side and load the replication bandwidth. So examination of disk mod is recommended. But anyone considering extending data protection in this way should include looking at the impact of having valid tape images being subject to modification at later dates. This is not just in relation to this service. This applies to any environment. It is good practice to eliminate disk mod when considering these services. And this applies to HSM tape as well. Doesn't increase the amount of data that you're retaining, but it does increase the number of tapes that you do to retain that potentially. But if your environment like us is unlimited on the number of virtual tapes, then it's not an issue. Now, I mentioned async replication. The point of this is, if you're looking at this service to address recovery from a previous ZOS disk snapshot, then you have the luxury of selecting a recovery point that ensures that all the required tape data is available to any recovered ZOS system. So that's the core element around this. You can actually roll it back to an individual timestamp. So it's not unitary like a snapshot where you roll it back to a 24-hour period. You want to make sure that that repository has the data in it. You can put the timestamp in that makes sure that the ransom protect data repository is fully populated for any disk service. Now, I mentioned external indexing. If you're looking at using this outside of a ZOS disk recovery, then you're going to need some kind of index of the environment. So you'll need an index of the repository. So if you are considering forensic data analysis as an ongoing process running alongside the data population and or the capability to do surgical recovery from the repository, then you're going to want to know what's in there. And you're going to need an index of the data within any group of tapes. So as fairly good practice, I would definitely say you need to start generating indexes external to your ZOS environment. I've taken the luxury of drawing it in as our MDI service, but any service to generate an extract and replicate it to an external target, whether it be part of your S3 repository, whether it be part of an NFS environment, etc. The capability to send that data set somewhere for you to recover from, so you can index it by data set. And then I reference encryption. Now, another good thing about the encryption that we have, if you're using Luminex CG Safe for encryption, then we actually have a number of options for implementation, plus additional options for securing, sharing keys, and that goes on top of the variations you can build into architectures for ransom protect. So in other words, on top of the sheer flexibility you've got around recovery. So managing encryption for us is a core element of the design of these services. I can't give you a single solution, but I would say it's a core element of the design of these services and would feature in any engagement with us when setting up a service for this. So encryption is a key part of it, if you forgive the statement. So the next set of slides talk to data recovery. And I've not seen this addressed very well or very specifically by other vendors yet. So I thought I'd introduce some terminology for this particular service. So talking about data recovery generally, you're going to need a recovery system. So you're going to have a ZOS environment you're going to want to recover the data from. So you're going to issue a tape mount from a ZOS environment, and the Ransom Protect service will recover the tapes indexed for the timestamp that you've entered to that ZOS environment. So it can be a separate ZOS environment to your primary systems. It can be exploiting a separate tape service. It can be to separate storage. So quite flexible around how you set that up. So you've got a recovery system, and then you need a recovery tape environment. So you need a virtualization layer through which you're going to recover the data. So a Luminex CGX, and you're going to need somewhere to recover that data to. And I would say typically it would be a separate storage pool for data recovery. And as good practice, I would say read only. So having dealt with audit for a long time over the years, I have been in issues in areas where we've gone into legal hold status, and the default position for any audit team is freeze everything and do it that way. So I would say you would freeze the source environment. You'd also have a separate storage pool for recovery. I would say definitely read only. And for tape services running forward from that point, you'd have a scratch pool for a separate scratch range for writes. Very straightforward to set up on CGX environments. So you've got a recovery system, you need a recovery tape service, and you need a recovery area. Start off with the worst case scenario, and we'll look at catastrophic recovery. And this is just general talking around the capabilities. How you actually implement this is interesting, depending on your the environment you're protecting and how you've architected it. So we talked about this, and the ZOS recoveries from disk flash copies. So they all look like they've had a crash stop. They all look like your power supply and your power protection's failed in your data center. So you're looking to recover consistency points. Now, as such, the data that you recover from the Ransom Protect repository it won't be the full tape catalog. The full tape catalog is available to you in the Ransom Protect repository, but you won't be looking to recover the full tape catalog to do the recovery of the ZOS environments. So you're not likely to require the full tape catalog capacity planned in the recovery area. So you can adjust your capacity planning accordingly. You will need a scratch range, and I would recommend a separate scratch range as you work your ZOS environments through. Straightforward to set up, reserve tape ranges, reserve storage pools, and you're in business. In any configuration, we would recommend to freeze the existing tapes as stored on the CGX. So in other words, your source environment, I would say you freeze. And then you have separate recovery areas, separate storage pools, reserved device addresses, and a separate range of addresses and tape range for scratch rates. So this is just to drive it home that that's what we'd recommend. But the exact config, and this covers the recovery system, the ZOS environment you're using to recover this data through, the virtualization layer, the recovery tape service, and the recovery areas. The configuration of these depend on the planned scenarios. So whether your planning is to always recover to your production environment, whether to recover to a specific environment you build in your CyberVault, etc. Straightforward to set up, but it can lead to a certain level of interaction to get it defined. There are decisions to be made, unfortunately. Surgical data recovery is interesting. We saw this as you wouldn't be using your source ZOS environment to do this. If you're looking at doing a surgical recovery from the Ransom Protect data repository, then you're looking at recovering a tape where potentially you already have versions of that tape active in your production environment. So you'd be looking for a separate ZOS system, so a separate recovery system to recover that data through, or two rather. You can actually use the production tape environment from which the data was replicated. You would need a separate recovery area. You may have a separate isolated tape environment, so you could have a completely isolated tape environment somewhere else physically with access to the repository. So the capability is there. And this brings in the capability to selectively examine the Ransom Protect repository at periods for data integrity, or to do selected recoveries of units of data. This even protects you from the catastrophic, I've had a problem in my tape catalog area. So this is quite a useful tool. If you're using snapshots to recover, if you're taking snapshots to protect your environment, then this becomes a bit of a clunky process because you have to mount the snapshot. You have a unitary copy. It's taken at that point in time. So there are some advantages for considering the continuous data population of the Ransom Protect repository. So as I said, Ransom Protect, we can integrate it into any Luminix virtual tape architecture, and we can actually add it to any point of that architecture. So you can have it across a system with the capability for any or all of the virtual tape components in that system to replicate out to your Ransom Protect data repository. It's transparent replication to the cloud, so it's a service that we put on the virtualization layer talking to the S3 repository. The S3 service gives you your air-gapped copy, and it can be used either as an additional air-gapped copy just for extended data protection within your current data center processing, or as a full-blown Ransom Protect version with multi-version support and point-in-time recoveries. And as I said, it has the capability to integrate into standard environments, smaller environments, but all the way to the Hitachi Data Fortress, the IBM Cyber Vault type services. Basically, the service as we've got it defined. There are extended options for recovery areas, how you use recovery systems, how you can implement forensic analysis, surgical recovery on these services, all the way through to catastrophic recovery of rolling a tape environment back to a specific point in time to match a disk snapshot. That's the service that's available through the environment as is. So this adds to the capabilities available to you, whether you're looking at taking a disk snapshot to protect your tape environment, whether you're looking to extend the grace period on your virtualization layer, you now have this capability as well. It's another tool in the toolbox if you want to play with it. So that's it. That's the capability. Create and maintain immutable, air-gapped copies of a virtual tape environment, but now including the recovery of data to any selected point in time as specified by you within a given date range. It's continuous data protection, so it doesn't interrupt day-to-day processing. It's an air-gapped repository. User-defined recovery timestamps, dynamically user-defined as well, and multiple options for data recovery. So that's basically it. And I've rattled through that. Are there any questions?
You can unmute your line, folks, if you want to ask Tim a question live, or of course you can post a question in the chat. I actually have a question for everybody while everyone's thinking about it, if they've got a question to ask. So if you look at a sort of a cybersecurity team in your organization, there's probably some people in that team that are looking at ransomware. That's, it's part of their job description to make sure the organization are taking all the necessary steps to try and protect themselves against it. But I'm curious as to know, in, like, for example, mainframe security teams, or like in storage teams, if we've got some storage admins here, if you are actively, if this is something you're actually looking at, ransomware, or if you've been engaged at all by someone from cybersecurity team, maybe show your hand. If you go down to the bottom of your screen and look at reactions, there's a little show of hand. I'm just interested to know if anybody on the call is kind of, involved with ransomware planning at all. One per Aileen, of course,
Aileen.
Mrs. Storage. That's good.
Yeah, I must admit the conversations we're having around this are beginning to get serious. It was previously, it was a bit like cloud tape or cloud services. It was a tick box exercise on responses for RFPs, RFIs, whatever you put forward, it had to include cloud capability. These days, this is a serious topic when it comes to discussion with customers. They're much more focused around what they want, what they need, and what the requirements are. It's an interesting area.
Indeed. Damien, I think you unmuted your line. Did you want to say something? We can't hear if you're talking. Oh, he's gone. Can I ask though, and I've just, the question just popped into my head and is gone again. So yesterday, Tim, I asked we had a ransomware presentation yesterday, and I asked the presenter, had he heard of any ransomware attacks or near misses for mainframe sites? So the same question to you.
Well, I would say yes in terms of attacks. The core service has not been, from what I'm aware, the environments that I've seen, and it's 3, the core mainframe service wasn't compromised. It was the satellite system. So the mainframe is typically a core system, and the interaction with the mainframe is through satellite links into the mainframe environment, which are non-ZDoS environment type services. And it's those that have been compromised that I've seen, not the core mainframe service.
Oh, okay.
Not yet.
Well, this is it. This is it. It's like not yet. And I think it was like, if we roll back a few years about sort of hacking, mainframes being hacked, it was kind of unheard of back in the day, wasn't it? And then of course there have been a few cases that we have come through on that, and I fear that the same is true for, like, a ransomware attack. We will at some point, I'm sure, hear of a full-scale attack on a system. And Aileen actually posts a question in the chat saying, after the HSE, the Irish Health Service attack in 2021, it's a massive topic in the bank where she's working. So it's good that it's been it's on the agenda.
Yes. Now this is for us. This is an early iteration of the service. We have a white paper on the service. We have a document, like I said, which is, I would say, I'd love to say it's best practice, but that's far too arrogant. It's just good practice and things to consider. And if you're interested, I haven't put it on the website yet. I will have it on the website very soon. So if you want a copy of those documents in the short term, just drop me an email. Okay. They apply, the considerations in them apply not just to using Ransom Protect for continuous data protection into an S3 repository. They apply whether you're looking at snapshot, whether you're looking at the grace period, etc. Sort of considerations around how you sync a tape environment with a ZDoS environment, and then manage things like data retention in your tape catalog, how you look at scratch processing in relation to ZDoS disk snapshots, sort of thing about just good practice for things you need to do.
Yeah. And
So,
can I ask about, like, so you talked about, like, you know, S3 services like Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, and so on. I mean, is there, with this solution, I mean, I guess there's always, I think with some organizations, there's nervousness, isn't there, about putting stuff in the cloud. I know a lot of companies are doing it, but it's, you know, and the security of that data, you know, encryption options and things. Was there any sort of discussion, any thoughts on that?
yes, and that's a very good question. Perhaps I should have called that out. In terms of S3, it doesn't have to be a public offering. That is the area that customers are balking at the moment, using a public storage platform. So on-premise cloud tape or on-premise cloud services are available through various storage vendors. So Oracle ZFS, NetApp, Hitachi Content Platform is an on-premise capability. NEC Hydra Store. These are all, they all have S3 interfaces, and they all use the standard AWS environments. Now, when you look at S3 across the estates, the implementation for the basic services is absolutely standard. So we are certified against AWS, HCP Cloud Scale, HCP Classic, Google Content Platform, and NetApp, etc. for on-premise, NEC Hydra Store, etc. It's when you get down to the more esoteric areas of AWS support. So things like legal hold, object lock. There's nothing in this service that precludes the use of them. And in fact, we haven't done the certification, but I'm 90% certain that it is absolutely capable within the environment. There are just slightly different implementations of those services on different platforms. So we have got various implementations around the cloud service, and we have had to tweak one or two things for different vendors for storage. But we are, it's a very straightforward thing for us to do to manage, because the standards are well publicized. In terms of recovery time objectives and bandwidth, thank you very much, Damien. If you're looking at using the Ransom Protect repository for recovery, then you've got your ZOS disk environment, you bring it back up. You're then doing recovery of individual tape images to bring those databases, the image copies, database logs, etc., to bring them to a consistency point to make them usable. So you're not recovering the full tape catalog. You're just recovering the data you need at the time you need it. So the overhead on the recovery is the amount of time it takes to recover from the cloud service, from the S3 repository. If it's on-premise, it's fully in your control. So we have got, at the moment, we have got 10 or 25 gig links, multiple links available on the CGX platform. You can use any number of CGX platforms to achieve this. So for one implementation, I think the customer was backing up 330 terabytes of data a day through their virtual tape environment. And all we did was just expand the capacity of the virtual, the CGX implementation to match that requirement for the bandwidth. So I could have addressed the scalability of the Luminex kit, but I didn't think it was fair in this discussion. But yes, the capability is there. You're not recovering the full tape catalog, you're recovering the data that you need at the time to bring it back. Now, system level backup is Gen 0. What happens if you need to go back to Gen -2, for example? Are you talking about a generation data set recovery? Because it's whatever you've got in your tape catalog at the time that you put your timestamp in, that will be available to you in the repository. So if your timestamp for an index point includes the tape versions for Gen -2, they're available to you in the repository. So you can go back to those versions.
Okay, thanks, Damien. Any more questions for Tim? Damien says thank you.
Oh, Thank you, David. And thanks for the questions, everyone.
So I have one more point to write on a personal level. So I mentioned this yesterday, Tim, about ransomware protection at home. So I have a NAS at home, and I take snapshots automatically every night. Is that a good thing? And I also do an offline backup once a month. So the full snapshot, all my computers and things, and anything, you know, photos, stuff, I take a backup of it, and it's an offline copy, not connected to any computer, and it's just kind of stored away. And then I do another one the next month. So if I ever had a ransomware attack at home, I hope not being a security person, then I would be able to recover from something. So am I taking the right steps as a consumer?
I would say yes. I mean, you're dragging me back to my storage management days at various customers. Yes, that capability within the. I just wish I practiced what I preached, because I have an Apple Mac behind
This
me.
is the thing, isn't it? Yeah.
I have a recovery from it.
Yes. Yes.
I've got a T-shirt that I love to wear, and it says the cloud is just somebody else's computer.
Yes.
Yeah. And part of that is sometimes I get this, well, we're not going to worry about that. That's out in the cloud. And I'm going, but that's why you should worry about it, because it's not this nebulous thing. You're handing that off. You're trusting that to somebody else. So I like wearing that T-shirt sometimes.
I happen to agree with you. My views on cloud services is semi looking at it as an outsourcing by another name, because you are in effect trusting it to someone else, and that's where having on-premise cloud services puts it back in your capability. It introduces it to your own security levels. You can't outsource security. You can, people do, but in my view, it is not a good idea. So if you bring it back in-house, you have a platform available, ring-fenced within the controls of your cyber vault, within the fortress, how you manage it, completely separate team managing it, etc. You can introduce storage components, as I said, like NEC HydraStore, NetApp, Oracle ZFS, if you wanted to, has got an S3 interface. It does not have to be a public service.
Good point.
Exactly.
But no, I totally agree on the whole, cloud thing. Like Patricia says, it's just another computer that somebody else owns, but at the end of the day, is a computer, and it needs configuring, and I think that we've kind of got into this, that sort of lulled ourselves into this false sense of security that it's kind of the silver bullet, isn't it? That sort of, oh, well, we won't keep it on site, and we'll send it off to the cloud, and it's nice and safe and secure, and all the bells and whistles that come with the marketing. Yeah. Good points. There was a question. Oh, you've already replied to that, Tim. That's good.
I sneaked it into the chat. Yes.
Great. And Aileen says, I should also remember my offline backups. Yes, you should, Aileen. You're a storage person. Okay. So if there are no more questions, just give everyone a few more seconds. Just if you want to, like I say, you can unmute your line if you want to ask Tim a question directly.
Oh, and don't forget, bung some feedback in. This is early days on this deck here, and I'm looking for any feedback as to how to improve it. If there's any bits you think I've missed, just drop me an email.
I will give you one. I will give you one piece of good piece of feedback. I do like the use of good practice rather than best practice. I think that's such a more kind of a better way to put something that's when something's sort of in the mix, as it were, and yeah, not everything's
nearly
best
cross
practice.
good out and just put thoughts. So,
or proven practices, something like that. But there's best practice certainly overused. But no, thank you so much for taking us through that. And I think for all of us security professionals, actually, it's ransomware is part of the day job, whether we like it or not, and we can't just sort of say leave it to the storage people to worry about. It's a kind of a collaborative effort, I would say. and will become more and more higher up the agenda. So yeah, this is session 7G. I have put the link to Tim's for Tim's feedback in the chat, so you can click on that link if you like, or you can scan the QR code there on your screen. But please do that. Just a quick recap that the feedback is used for Tim. We do share the feedback with all the presenters. And also if we use it for GSE, so we can deliver a better conference. And also for those of you collecting CPE or CPD points, you need to complete the feedback, and then that will add up to the points that you get on your certificate that you can download from MyGSE. So yeah, thanks so much, Tim. So we have a break now and until 12 o'clock UK time. And up after that, the sessions continue. So we have David, who's going to join us from Broadcom. He's going to be talking to us those thorny regulations, whether it's SOX, GDPR, DORA. So he's going to be giving us some hints and tips on those. So I hope you can join us for that at 12 o'clock. Other than that, enjoy your coffee break, and we'll see you soon. Thanks once again, Tim.
Well, thanks for hosting it, and thanks to the audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.